YouTube, Mewtwo back with another video, and this time decked out New York style to talk about video gaming in New York, or at least from a tourist perspective. Obviously from the videos I've been putting up recently, I was away in New York and it was a good time, but I figured maybe it might be of interest to just ramble about some of the stuff I've seen, and I'll probably break this video into kind of two kind of sections. In the first part I'm going to talk about or focus more on the gaming stuff I've seen, because most people who watch my videos are probably interested in the gaming stuff. But for the second half I'll just do some general thoughts on New York as a city and what it's like to holiday there. I know from PMs that there's people be interested to go over, so I figure I'll share some thoughts on that too. I suspect this might be a little long, so like me you might want to get yourself a drink. I recommend tea, but whatever floats your boat. This isn't tea though. My throat's already going. That's not a good time. But before I get into the holiday stuff, I just like to do a shout out. A good friend of mine, Freya Plus, has started kind of putting up gaming videos onto his YouTube channel. He had a channel kind of with a few other randomites before, but now he's decided he wants to do some gaming stuff. It's largely kind of gameplay stuff, achievement tutorials, speed runs, and things like that at the moment. So if you're interested in that type of content, put a link in the description below. Check it out. I'm sure he'd appreciate any support, and yeah, you never know. If you like it, I'm sure he'd appreciate getting a few subs in, because it is hard starting out. I've seen a lot of people on YouTube, Steve Benway and people like that, Lone Boys post 1975, talking about the breakdown of community, and it's harder to get exposure and things like that. So when he was talking to me about it, I could kind of empathize with that sort of scenario. So I said, I should definitely give a shout out if it can help at all. But anyway, rambling, and I haven't even got to the main event. That's typical, you'd say. But anyway, New York. When I went over, the one thing that I obviously knew was in New York was the Nintendo World Store. A lot of people might see me as a kind of a Sega fanboy here, but I enjoy gaming on the whole, not one particular console or brand or anything like that. But my two particular, favourite companies, if you will, would be Nintendo and Sega. So naturally I was keen to go to the World Store. And I don't know if it will be up by the time I upload this video, but I did a kind of a run through the World Store, and it's an interesting place. I have to say I was a little bit disappointed. I was expecting a bit more, or maybe it was my expectation that kind of made me a little disappointed. Maybe the shop is kind of cool to go to and impressive. I mean, I did certainly spend a fair bit of money there, but it seemed to lack character. I was expecting, I suppose, you look at the Nintendo franchises, they're very character driven, they're very, I suppose you could say cartoony, they're colourful, there's a lot of vibrancy in them. But the store was kind of devoid of life almost. And it was busy, don't get me wrong, I went there twice, and the first day it was packed. I mean, I got like 10 street pass hits like in the blink of an eye. But it was nice anyway. I mean, downstairs you have kind of a few kind of communal places where you can play your DS and take on maybe Mario Kart challenges, that sort of thing. And you have the Pokemon Center, I suppose they'd call it. And that was, I think, the one place where there was any sort of character. They had like a Pikachu statue, small one there. And then just a standard shelf full of games on the other side of the wall. In Windows they did have like Mario displays, they had like a Triforce, and they had decals on the lift. you know, Donkey Kong, things like that, which were cool. They kind of gave it a bit more character than just I'm walking into Macy's, or I'm walking into just any other retail store. You know, it didn't say that this was Nintendo. Upstairs, of course, they have the history place where they have, you know, cabinetry full of, you know, franchises and the console history, things like that, and that is nice. It's good to show, you know, that they're aware of their history and they value it and present it. A lot of companies, they don't seem to show that sort of respect to what they've done before. They don't seem to have pride nearly in it. They might try and shun away things. And Nintendo, of course, do that to a certain degree. But, you know, I think they had Virtual Boy there. I've actually forgotten, and it's not like that was a massive success. And they have plenty of merchandising. But, I mean, if you're going to New York and you're into gaming and you have, you know, you like a bit of Nintendo stuff, it's worth a visit. If nothing else, it's in the Rockefeller Plaza, but that's a big area. It's not like, you know, one building. There's kind of concourses and extra buildings and whatnot. Sheesh, we got lost. You know, New York is all block based, and you would think, how could you kind of get lost? You know, going in squares. It just seemed to happen so easily. It's a place where a lot of tourists would go anyway, because there's other things to do there. Like, that's where they film Turkey Rock. There's the Rainbow Room. There's other bits and bobs, which I'll talk about more of that later. So, you know, if you're there, check it out. They also have a GameStop in the centre itself. That's not worth checking out. It's a small shop, and the prices were pretty high. I was surprised to see that they had Game Boy Advance games, but they were all loose and they were kind of locked up in a display case, so I didn't really bother. I was just curious to see what GameStop's like in America. Now, that's the Nintendo World Store. But once I had kind of gotten that out of the way, shall we say, it was a case of, well, what else is there in this kind of place that would be of interest to a gamer? I often, when I've gone over to places like London, you know, I've asked before about, are there any retro shops, things like that around, and the general consensus is not really. You know, you're better off heading out of London, or, you know, going to maybe car boot sales, things like that. But the rent is so high, is very, very hard to find you know, a kind of a specialist. I think there's one just off Goodge Street. Now, believe it or not, I've never got around to seeing it, but they're meant to be okay, a little pricey, but okay. But generally, you don't find too many retro, you know, game type shops. I was expecting the same in New York. There are two places that I know of. One of them, I think, is called J&L something computer gaming, maybe. I'm not too sure. I did not visit that one, so I can't comment on it. It's actually in I think it's down near Avenue Way, so it was quite a bit away from me. The other one was also a bit of a, you know, trip, but it wasn't as bad. It was just a couple of changes on the subway, and it's called Video Games New York. I think that seems to be all one word from the way they tend to list it on their site and stuff. That I did get to visit, and again, like the World Store, I have a video kind of going through the place that may or may not be up before this video, and I was surprised by the store. They had some interesting stuff in the window. They had Mario and whatnot. It nearly had more character than the World Store. But by geez, when you step inside, it's like in Aladdin's cave. That's the best way I could describe it. It's a small space, but it is crammed to heavens with stuff. You name a system. Fairchild Channel F, CDIs, the obscure machines they had stuff for. So if you're going over looking for like NES, SNES, Mega Drive, Genesis, N64, you're going to find them. They had new sealed N64 games that were actually fairly reasonably priced, I thought, for a new sealed game. They were pretty much selling for their original retail price, maybe a little over depending on the game. And I thought, that's actually, for essentially a brand new N64 game, that's pretty good. And certainly over here, maybe there's a difference between American pricing and prices of PAL games, but some of those games that I seen would have fetched a fair bit of money. Of course, I went in looking for the Sega stuff as well, the Sega Master System stuff, and I showed a few pickups. The Master System section wasn't great, and it was in the last. They kind of had like 3 aisles. The first aisle was kind of modern stuff, so I didn't really look too much in there. There was some handheld stuff as well. The second aisle had, well, on the back they had this kind of history display sort of thing, which I'll talk about a little bit. But then they had like N64, PlayStation, kind of 32-bit era. Back a little, kind of as you walk down the shop, they had the 8-bit and the 16-bit stuff. Well, they actually had Sega stuff near the N64 stuff as well. They kind of had a split. I'm not too sure why they done it that way. They seem to have like glass or cabinets, a lot of stuff behind cabinets, so maybe they felt that they were the more valuable Genesis games. But I seen stuff like Sonic Spin Ball in the glass cabinet, thinking that can hardly be that valuable. I mean, it's a Sonic game, yeah, so it's always going to have a bit of cachet, but whatever. But then they have this tiny third aisle, which when I first seen it for a split second I thought, well, maybe this is like their stock area. It didn't even look like you were meant to walk there, but when I looked at the games, I said, no, this looks like it's properly laid out on shelves and stuff, so I guess you are, it's just so tight. And yeah, I mean, they had like Atari stuff down there and television stuff. It seemed to almost be the early stuff, the 8-bits kind of curving around the store and kind of going up, shall we say, in generations. It was like so high as well. The amount of shelves. It was actually a case where they had so much stuff. It was so high, and I'm not the tallest person in the world. I couldn't look through it all. It was just not possible. I will give them credit for pricing a lot of their stuff too, that a lot of places don't, and that bugs me. If I don't see a price, to be honest, I don't want to ask, because when you get up there, they could throw any sort of price at you. I just can't be bothered with that. So, lesson for shops: price your stock. They had Doom on the 32X. I was on the lookout to pick up something for my 32X just to have a game, test the system with. If that hadn't been priced, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. But it was, so I did. At the back, as it was mentioned just a few minutes ago, they had this kind of, I wouldn't say it's a history section because a lot of stuff in there is for sale. But they do have some pretty unusual items. Like, that's where they have their Virtual Boy and things like that. But they have like signed stuff by Miyamoto. So presumably they went to the World Store when he was there. And they have a Glover N64 developer cartridge, which I was really surprised to see that in a game shop. So, lots of interesting stuff like Game and Watches and whatnot in there. They were all definitely behind glass, and I can understand why. Apparently the owner of the shop also has the Nintendo World Championship grey cart, which we all know that's a pretty pricey one, so that just shows you the type of stuff that they have there. If you're a gamer and you're going to New York, you should absolutely check that place out. The chances of you not finding something, I'd say, are pretty low. Or even just to see, it's an interesting place. And the one little caveat to that is, of course, the games are largely NTSC. So unless the system is region free, or you have a mod or an American system, you won't necessarily be able to play them in Europe. Which is why I kind of targeted stuff like the Master System, which is region free, and my Genesis, so that I can play that. What else? I think that's about it. About video games in New York. Definitely worth checking out. I can't comment on the other one, but I'll in the description below. if you're watching this on YouTube, and there's a description below. I'll put in details about both places. So, where else did I visit? Well, that was kind of it in terms of kind of classic gaming or retro gaming. I did go to Dave & Buster's arcade in Times Square, which I put a video up of already. It was, as a tourist, you're going to go to Times Square. The chances of you not going there are very low. So, while you're there are places worth checking out that have kind of relation to gaming, and Dave & Buster's definitely fits that category as it's an arcade. Now, I had a quick look through the arcade before buying what they call their power cards. Basically, they're little credit card style membership things that you put money onto and you swipe them on the machines themselves. So on the machine they'll have a little kind of reader, and it'll tell you on the display how much credits it costs to play. Like say for example, I think Pac-Man was like 8.8 credits, something around that. And you can basically put credits onto your card. When you go there the first time, you have to buy the card, but and I think that might be a tenner. But then, well, I know I spent 15 when I first went there to buy the card, and I think there was like if you spend an extra $5 you get these bonus credits. So I think for 15 I got in or around 60 credits. Depending on the game, that can last you quite a while, or it can go fairly fast. I kind of varied mine up a bit. I played some of the video games and they were the expensive ones. Like some of them were up on 12 and perhaps more credits. So you could see how you could burn through your credits fairly fast that way. And then some of the other games like the redemption games and whatnot, they were pretty cheap, and the physical games, so things like Skee Ball was possibly the cheapest thing there. It was 2.9 credits. So I mean, you can make your credits go a long way that way if you so choose. I'd actually never played Skee Ball before, and I really enjoyed it. It was great fun. And one thing that bugged me though was there's these generally the targets. Skee Ball, you're right, most people probably know, but if you don't, it's kind of like this bowling style lane, but at the end there's kind of a little ramp, and there's several targets that you got to get the ball to land into. Most of them are in a line, so it's going up 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and they get harder to hit as you go, but there's two kind of in the corners. Now they're much harder to get into, but they're meant to be worth 100. I did manage to get it into them. Actually, I didn't. My girlfriend did, and you didn't. You only got 50, which was really annoying. It was an interesting system on that sort of, on the Skee Ball as well, because it was kind of all communal. Every time people were swiping, they were part of the day, and if you scored 550 points, you would win the jackpot, and you get like 10,000 tickets. Or sorry, not 10,000. You get however many plays there had been, so over the day it'll build up. When I was there it was over 10,000, which just shows you how many swipes I got. Of course, getting 550 points, that's a tall ask. You know, you only get 9 shots, so if you were to even get 50s on every single one of them, that won't be enough. You have to get 100, and as I said, the 100 didn't seem to be working, so I don't know, maybe it's not possible. The selection of games, I suppose it's your standard fare for a modern arcade. They'd sit-down racers, they'd light gun games, they'd Guitar Hero, the new Pac-Man Battle Royale, which was a good game. They'd Pac-Man Galaga 25th Anniversary Cab. So that was the only kind of retro style game. It was also one of the possibly the cheapest video game. One thing that I found amusing was that on the Daytona USA cab, I didn't play it because I played it before, but they had like this VR camera mode or something like that, which of course stands for virtual racing camera. The dynamic pan of the camera is patented for virtual racing, so only Sega can use it. Generally you have more cut, there's no kind of smooth transition. So there's a patent in action. They also had the Mario Grand Prix or Mario Arcade GP2. You can play Mario Kart anywhere else, so it's worth a shot, but it didn't draw me in anyway. Now they also have lots of, they have air hockey, they had kind of gambling machines as well, and they have a bar. So if you fancy a drink as well, you can do that, which I can see how that would be appealing. It's not quite a barcade, and I believe there is a barcade in New York, although you can go to it. But yeah, if it can certainly, I mean, if you're there with someone else who might not be as into gaming, you can play, and maybe they could have a drink at the bar or whatever. And yeah, it contributes to the atmosphere. That's for sure. Anyway, it's not rowdy by any means. Like, I mean, there's be kids there and whatnot, but you do have that kind of arcade sense. You have the neons and the noises and whatnot. So it was fun. I mean, it's on Times Square, so it's worth going. A little tip: at the moment they're doing half price Wednesdays, so all the games are half price. That's well worth doing because your credits go twice as far. Strange that. And it's probably, I found it useful. They had this thing like, if you buy a tenner you get X number of credits, but you can put in a fiver to get like a booster pack type of thing. That seemed to be good value to me, so that's what I did. So other stuff in Times Square. Well, they have the Toys R Us, and there's a gaming section out there where I managed to pick up a few bits. That was worth visiting. I mean, Toys R Us is worth visiting anyway because there's bits and bobs to see throughout. They have like a Jurassic Park dinosaur, a Ferris wheel, Lego buildings, things like that. It's worth checking out. I actually found it a lot more impressive than FAO Schwartz. I mean, they had the clock, and they had the piano from Big, and they had this kind of toy history thing, Dr. Trout, and I mean, it was interesting. If you have any sort of crossover with toys and whatnot, worth checking out. Is there any other gaming stuff though? I kind of feel like I'm forgetting one, but no, probably not. So in terms of gaming, I was pleasantly surprised. There's a unique modern shop. You can find some retro stuff. You could find an arcade or a barcade around there. There's a few bits to do. I was not expecting to find anything. I thought the rents in New York or whatever, I'm not going to find like a retro game shop. So to see one of those was surprising. So that's it for kind of like some gaming thoughts and whatnot.